Dear brother, dear sister who is listening to me right now, life presents us with challenges that often seem greater than our ability to overcome them. Perhaps you are facing circumstances that have weighed heavily on your heart, times when the burden seems unbearable and the way ahead obscure. I want to invite you on a journey of faith, not a simple repetition of words, but a real encounter with the divine presence that renews our hope. This is an opportunity to set aside for a few moments the worries that surround us and open our hearts to an experience of spiritual empowerment. I remember the story of David, a young shepherd boy who faced a giant when everyone around him was trembling with fear. What set David apart was not his physical strength or his warrior skills, but his deep trust in something greater than himself. While the experienced soldiers saw only impossibility before them, David saw beyond. He saw the possibility of victory through faith. "You come against me with sword, spear, and javelin," David told the giant, "but I come against you in the name of the Lord of hosts." At that critical moment, David didn't deny the reality of the challenge. The giant was real. The threat was concrete. But he refused to let the size of the problem determine the size of his faith. Perhaps you are facing your own Goliath today. It could be an illness that doctors say is incurable, a relationship that seems hopelessly broken, a financial situation that presents no way out, or an internal struggle that has sapped your strength and joy. Just as David didn't overcome the giant just by looking at him, we too need to turn our gaze away from our circumstances and towards the source of our strength. It is in this place of deep connection that we find not only consolation, but also direction and power to face our challenges. This prayer practice I'm sharing with you is not a magic formula, but an invitation to renew our perspective. 7. Times like the circles around Jericho, like the 7 days of creation, we will turn to the Creator for a new vision, not so that problems simply disappear, but so that we can face them with new strength. At every moment of this journey, we are invited to leave behind the limited thinking that tells us that's impossible, and embrace the expansive vision that reminds us that there are paths we haven't yet seen, solutions we haven't yet imagined. I invite you to create a quiet space where you can concentrate. Breathe deeply. Allow your concerns to be acknowledged. Don't deny or diminish them, but then gently place them before the one who can do infinitely more than we ask or think. Like David, who collected 5 smooth stones from the stream before facing Goliath, we will prepare ourselves with the stones of faith, hope, truth, peace, and trust. And unlike the young shepherd who only needed 1 stone, we will walk a path of 7 stages, 7 moments of connection that together will form an experience of renewal. In this first moment, we acknowledge the problems we face, but we also declare that they will not have the last history. Just as David was not defined by the size of his opponent, but by the greatness of his faith, may we also rise above our circumstances to see a wider horizon and a renewed future. Let's start this journey with open hearts and receptive minds, confident that at the end of these 7 moments of prayer, we will not only have different words on our lips, but a transformed perspective in our hearts. As we continue our prayer journey, we turn our gaze to an area that touches all of our lives, our daily needs and the desire to prosper. Often, when we think of prosperity, our minds immediately go to material goods and financial comfort. But true prosperity goes much further. It is sufficiency in all areas of life. I remember the story of the prophet Elijah in a time of extreme scarcity. A devastating drought had gripped the land, and hunger was a daily reality for everyone. In the midst of this seemingly hopeless situation, God directed Elijah to the brook Cherith, where ravens, birds normally associated with prey, became messengers of provision, bringing him bread and meat, morning and night. What strikes us about this story is not just the miracle itself, but the unexpected way in which the provision arrived. Who would have thought that birds considered unclean by Jewish tradition would be instruments of sustenance for a prophet? This teaches us that divine provision often arrives in ways we couldn't anticipate or plan. Perhaps you're facing a dry spell in your life. Bills are piling up, opportunities seem scarce, and the financial future looks uncertain. Or perhaps your need is of a different kind. a shortage of health, of peace of mind, of direction for important decisions. In this second moment of our prayer, we recognize that true prosperity begins with a change of perspective. It's not just about having more, but recognizing enough. It's not just about accumulating resources, but distributing them wisely and generously. When Elijah later met the widow of Zarephath, who was preparing her last meal before starving to death with her son, he challenged her to an act of faith, to share the little she had first. The result was a continuous supply. The flour in the jar did not run out, and the oil in the bottle did not run dry. This is a profound lesson about trusting in the principle of abundance even when everything around suggests scarcity. Dear brother, dear sister, at this time of prayer, we invite you to examine your definitions of sufficiency and prosperity. Perhaps the abundance we seek is not in the infinite multiplication of resources, but in the satisfaction with what we have and the ability to share even when it seems that there is not enough. Let's pray. I recognize, Lord, that every good gift comes from you. Help me to see clearly the difference between my needs and my desires. Like Elijah, who found provision in the desert, help me to recognize the ravens you send into my life, those unexpected provisions that arrive at just the right moments. Free me from anxiety about tomorrow and teach me to live with gratitude for today. Transform my mindset of scarcity into a vision of abundance. May I, like the widow of Zarephath, give with faith even when there doesn't seem to be enough, trusting that in the economy of your kingdom, generosity does not impoverish but enriches. May my hands be open both to receive and to share. Where there are oppressive debts, bring financial freedom. Where there are difficult decisions to be made, grant wisdom. Where there are closed doors, open new paths. And above all, may I find contentment in simplicity, recognizing that true wealth is not in what I possess, but in who I am in you. Allow yourself now to visualize your needs being met, not necessarily in the way you imagined, but in the unique and often surprising way that characterizes divine provision. Like the ravens that fed Elijah, your answer may come from unexpected places and at unexpected times. Declare with confidence that just as the widow's flour and oil have not run out, the resources needed for your journey will not be lacking. True prosperity is not the absence of difficulties, but the presence of sufficiency even in the midst of challenges. It's having what you need for today and the confidence for tomorrow. As we close this second moment of our prayer journey, carry this truth with you. Authentic prosperity transcends the material and manifests itself in inner peace, healthy relationships, clear purpose, and the ability to be a blessing to others. We are now moving on to the third stage of our spiritual journey, where we are looking for that treasure that many consider to be unattainable these days: true inner peace. In a world characterized by haste, information overload, and constant worry, finding serenity has become a significant challenge. I remember the impressive story of Paul and Silas as recorded in the book of Acts. After being unjustly flogged and thrown into the innermost cell of a Roman prison, with their feet tied to the trunk, a situation of extreme physical discomfort and blatant injustice. What did these men do? The biblical text reveals something surprising. Around midnight, Paul and Silas prayed and sang praises to God, and the other prisoners listened to them. This narrative presents us with an extraordinary paradox: the ability to experience inner tranquility even when external circumstances are chaotic and painful. Paul and Silas did not deny their difficult reality, but neither did they allow it to determine their inner state. Dear friend, perhaps you are in your own prison right now, not necessarily between physical walls, but perhaps imprisoned by anxieties, fears, worries, or disturbing thoughts that steal your peace of mind. Perhaps you go to bed at night with a restless mind, unable to find rest. Or you wake up in the morning already feeling the weight of worries before you even set foot on the ground. The lesson we learn from Paul and Silas is profound. Inner peace is not the result of the absence of problems, but of the presence of something more powerful within us. They didn't sing because the situation was good. They sang despite the situation being terrible. They had discovered the secret of accessing a source of serenity that transcended their immediate circumstances. In this third moment of prayer, we are invited to practice this same principle. We acknowledge our difficulties, we don't deny or minimize them, but we deliberately choose to raise our thoughts above them, focusing on truths greater than our momentary circumstances. Let's practice together. Close your eyes for a moment. Take 3 deep breaths. As you inhale, visualize yourself receiving tranquility. As you exhale, imagine yourself releasing tension, worry, and anxiety. Now, mentally identify the biggest disturbance to your peace right now. Observe that thought or worry, not to fixate on it, but to recognize it and then gently put it aside. Like Paul and Silas, we are invited to raise our attention through positive words, gratitude, and praise, even when everything around us suggests despair. This is not a toxic denial of reality, but a conscious choice of perspective that allows us to access inner resources of resilience. Lord, at this moment I surrender to you the worries that have disturbed my tranquility. Like Paul and Silas, who sang in prison at midnight, help me to find the melody of peace even in challenging circumstances. I recognize that true serenity does not depend on everything being perfect around me, but on my connection with you within. Calm the winds of anxiety and the waves of worry that rise up in my mind. Just as you brought stillness to the stormy sea, bring stillness to my agitated thoughts. Renew my mind so that I can discern what really deserves my attention and what I should simply surrender. Free me from the tendency to ruminate on the past that I can't change, or to worry about the future that I can't predict. Teach me the art of living in the present moment, where true peace can be experienced. Grant me a peaceful sleep at night and a serene mind during the day. A remarkable feature of Paul and Silas's story is that their inner peace didn't just benefit themselves. The text says that the other prisoners listened to them. Their serenity in the midst of chaos became a living testimony, culminating in a transformation that affected not only their own lives, but that of everyone around them, including the jailer and his family. Likewise, when we find this peace that transcends understanding, it not only transforms our personal experience, but also positively influences our environments and relationships. The inner tranquility we cultivate becomes a gift not only to ourselves, but to all those with whom we interact. As we conclude this third moment of our journey, take with you this certainty. Even in the most challenging circumstances, it is possible to experience a serenity that defies human logic, not because the problems have disappeared, but because we have found an anchor point that remains firm even when everything around seems unstable. We have reached the fourth moment of our spiritual journey, where we turn our hearts to one of the most precious and often most painful aspects of our human experience, our family relationships. The ties that bind us to our relatives can be the source of the greatest joys, but also of the deepest wounds. One of the most moving stories about family reconciliation can be found in the narrative of Joseph, son of Jacob. Sold into slavery by his own brothers, Joseph experienced betrayal, abandonment, and injustice at the hands of those who were supposed to protect him. Years of separation followed, with Joseph facing unjust imprisonment in Egypt while his brothers dealt, perhaps, with the weight of guilt for their actions. The outcome of this story, however, offers us an extraordinary glimpse of the power of reconciliation. When he finally met his brothers again, Joseph, now in a position of power, had every reason and opportunity for revenge. Instead, his words reveal a profound inner transformation. Do not grieve or reproach yourselves for having sold me here, for it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. This ability to reinterpret past suffering through a lens of greater purpose allowed Jose to break the cycle of hurt and retaliation that could have perpetuated family suffering for generations. Dear friend, perhaps you carry the weight of fractured family relationships. It could be a rift between you and your children, tension with your parents, unresolved conflicts with siblings, or a marriage that has lost its original connection. Family wounds are often the most painful precisely because they involve people who should represent love and security in our lives. In this fourth moment of our prayer, we recognize that family restoration rarely happens instantly. It is a journey that requires patience, vulnerability, and often the courage to take the first step towards reconciliation. Like Joseph, we are invited to consider a broader perspective, to see beyond the immediate pain to the potential for healing and restoration that exists even in the most damaged relationships. This doesn't mean denying the reality of pain or minimizing injustices suffered, but choosing not to be trapped in them. Lord, I bring before you family relationships that need restoration in my life. Like Joseph, who was able to see your hand even in family betrayal, help me to see beyond the wounds and disappointments. Where there is hurt, sow forgiveness. Where there is distance, build bridges of communication. Where there is distrust, restore faith in the other. Give me the wisdom to discern when to reach out in reconciliation and when to respect healthy boundaries. Deliver me from both the bitterness that refuses to forgive and the naivety that ignores harmful patterns. Grant me words that heal rather than hurt, and ears that listen with understanding rather than judgment. For marriages in difficulty, it renews love and mutual respect. For estranged parents and children, it restores understanding and acceptance. For siblings in conflict, it revives unity and loyalty. For families fragmented by life's circumstances, it creates new beginnings and new connections. A remarkable aspect of Joseph's story is that after reconciliation, not only did he benefit, but the whole family found shelter and sustenance during a time of great scarcity. In the same way, when we work to restore our family ties, the benefits often extend far beyond the parties directly involved, creating a legacy of healing that can influence generations to come. On this journey of family restoration, remember, some wounds have taken years to form and can take considerable time to heal completely. Small steps towards reconciliation are significant. A phone call, a sincere letter, a frank but respectful conversation. Every gesture of goodwill can be the start of a new family story. At the same time, we recognize that full reconciliation is not always possible in every situation, especially when it involves ongoing patterns of abuse or destructive behavior. In these cases, restoration can mean setting healthy boundaries and finding inner peace even in the absence of a fully restored relationship. As we conclude this fourth moment of our spiritual journey, carry this truth with you. Just as Joseph saw purpose even in the painful family separation, our own experiences of brokenness can eventually reveal themselves as important chapters in a larger story of redemption, not just for ourselves, but for those we love. We have reached the culminating moment of our prayer journey, where we contemplate the theme of spiritual victory. While the previous parts dealt with specific challenges, everyday problems, material needs, the search for inner peace and family restoration, we now turn to the deeper dimension of our struggle, the combat that takes place on the invisible plane of our existence. One of the most impressive stories about spiritual victory is found in the experience of Job, a man who faced devastating losses in practically every area of his life. What makes his narrative particularly relevant is that Scripture offers us a glimpse behind the spiritual scenes of his suffering, a reality usually hidden from our eyes. Job lost his possessions, his children, his health, and even the support of his wife and friends. In the midst of all this, he wrestled with deep questions about justice, purpose, and the very nature of God. His story is not one of instant or easy victory, but of a perseverance that culminated in a transformative encounter and a remarkable restoration. Dear brother, dear sister, perhaps you are facing a period in which you feel that invisible forces are conspiring against you. It could be a persistent sense of defeat, negative patterns that seem impossible to break, oppressive thoughts that undermine your confidence, or obstacles that continually block your spiritual progress. This struggle, although invisible to the outside eye, is profoundly real and often more exhausting than life's tangible challenges. At this final moment of our prayer journey, we are invited to recognize the multidimensional nature of our battles. As the Apostle Paul said, our struggle is not against people but against the powers and authorities, against the rulers of this dark world, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Job's story teaches us that spiritual victory rarely comes through the immediate elimination of all problems, but through a transformation in our understanding and relationship with the divine. At the end of his ordeal, Job declares, My ears had heard about you, but now my eyes have seen you. This transition from theoretical knowledge to profound personal experience marked his true victory. Lord, in this moment of prayer, I recognize that my most significant struggles occur in the invisible realm of the heart and spirit. Like Job, who persevered through devastating losses, strengthen my resolve to persist even when I don't fully understand the purpose behind the trials. Grant me discernment to identify negative thought patterns, destructive emotions, and limiting beliefs that have imprisoned my spirit. Where there is persistent discouragement, establish unshakable hope. Where there is paralyzing fear, implant supernatural courage. Where there is mental confusion, bring clarity of purpose. Free me from any influence that obscures my perception of the truth or keeps me in cycles of self-destructive behavior. As a liberated warrior, allow me not only to experience personal victory, but to become an instrument of liberation for others facing similar battles. An often overlooked aspect of Job's story is that his restoration included not only the recovery of his material losses, but the strengthening of his community. At the end of the narrative, family and friends who had abandoned him returned, bringing gifts and sharing meals. This detail reminds us that genuine spiritual victory does not isolate us, but reconnects us in deeper and more authentic ways with those around us. As we complete this journey of 7 prayerful moments, remember that, like Job, you are not only destined to survive your trials, but to emerge from them with a deeper understanding, a more resilient faith, and a testimony that can inspire others. The scars of your battles become credentials of authenticity in a world hungry for genuine hope. I conclude with this transforming truth. The greatest spiritual victory is not necessarily the elimination of all challenges, but the ability to maintain integrity, faith, and love even in the midst of life's most severe storms. Like Job, may we be able to say at the end of our trials, "I know that my Redeemer lives," a declaration not of someone who has escaped suffering, but of someone who has found meaning and purpose through it. May this day of prayer not be just a passing moment, but the beginning of a new way of facing life's challenges, with renewed courage, broadened perspective, and the deep certainty that no spiritual battle faced with faith is ever truly lost.